I'm David Peters. We're at Oklahoma State University. It's November 23rd, 2015, and I'm with Ron Stevens for an interview for OState Stories. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you.
Please say your name and please spell it for us.
Ron Stevens, R-O-N-S-T-E-V-E-N-S.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ron. So where did you grow up?
Grew up in Oklahoma City, and lived there until I came to OSU.
Okay. And what did you do? Did you come straight to OSU out of high school?
No, I stayed. I didn't go to college immediately. I worked to save money, and I was also at that time wanted to run in college, and I was sort of scouting out different options. And originally, in fact, was going to go to the University of Arizona, but changed my mind. First I went to Central State for a semester and ran there, and then was going to go to the University of Arizona, but decided not to try to run anymore and ended up coming here.
So where'd you go from high school then?
Northwest class in high school in Oklahoma City.
Okay. And you said run. What were you?
Cross country.
Cross country.
Yeah, I was a distance runner.
Okay. So why did you end up here?
You know, when you grow up in Oklahoma, back then anyway, I think in my class had 500 and something students, and the one afterwards had a lot more. But very few people from my class went out of state. I mean, you know, you went to OU or you went to OSU. My brother had gone to OU. I don't really remember, you know, I don't really remember why OSU. You know, my wife was the same way. You know, it's what you did. You know.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't run cross country here?
No.
Okay. So what years were you here then?
I got here in fall of '64, and then left January of '68.
Okay. And what'd you major in?
Sociology.
Sociology. Okay. Where'd you live?
Oh, well, I lived off campus most of the time. At the point at which I decided to come here, it was too late to get into a dorm. And I lived on, I think it was Ramsey, in a converted back porch on Ramsey where the floor sloped. And then that was my first place. And then I moved into the apartments. They just built the apartments out northwest of the campus.
Was that Brumley or?
I don't remember the name.
Okay.
I think they just called it the apartments at the time.
Okay, just university housing.
Yeah, and 4 people were in a dorm, and so that's where I lived my second year, and then moved off campus again into a little house with friends on 3rd Street, I think. And the house doesn't exist anymore. But and that's where eventually the drummer ultimately ended up becoming the office of the drummer. That's where we produced it.
How'd you get around? Did you have a car?
I had a car.
Okay.
60 Falcon.
Oh, okay. So what activities did you get involved with while you were here?
Well, the first thing that I got involved with was the Wesley Foundation. I'd been a Methodist, went to St. Luke's Church in Oklahoma City, and was a fairly religious person, and just found my way to the Wesley Foundation, and the 2 campus ministers there were really exceptional. There were a lot of things going on there, and they kind of took me under their wing, especially one of them, and that really was the beginning of just making connections around, because a lot of people, including people who hadn't even grown up Methodist, ended up kind of hanging out there because it was an interesting place to be with interesting things happening.
What were their names, the 2 ministers?
Carl Caskey was the head campus minister, and Vance Engelman was the other one.
Did you get involved with any of the local Methodist churches, Highland Park or First Methodist at all?
No,
or
mostly? I didn't. It was really just the
Wesley
Foundation.
Okay. Do you remember other personalities from the foundation? Do you remember Ted Agnew or?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, Ted Agnew was involved. Actually, Robert Kahn had been involved, as a matter of fact. I mean, when Kahn was named president, there were cheers throughout. I mean, it was very ironic the way things turned out, but he was a Methodist, and you know, Caskey knew him and liked him and thought this was really great. You know, he was the first president to come out of College of Arts and Sciences. He'd been, I think, dean of College of Arts and Sciences before, and you know, a lot of people. The head of the Sociology Department was thrilled. You know, everybody was. So at the time, and you know, there were other people. You know, I can't think of. It's a little hard for me to remember which of the faculty members that I knew had a relationship with the Wesley Foundation and which didn't. During that time, it was an interesting time because I got to know a lot of faculty members who I never had classes from, just because of the stuff that was going on campus. And it was very, Clarence Cunningham was
I was going to mention Clarence.
Clarence, gosh, what a man. I mean, seriously, what a man. And I had a conversation with him one time later, you know, after I'd been here for some time and had grown disenchanted with the way a lot of things were done here. And I remember having a conversation with him one time where, you know, complaining about how awful it was to be stuck here. And at the time, Berkeley, there was all this, you know, stuff going on at Berkeley, and I think he'd gone to Berkeley. I think he had a degree from there. And he said, Ron, he said, you don't understand. He said, if you were going to Berkeley, you wouldn't ever get to know any of your professors. The classes you would take often wouldn't be taught by professors. And he was right. You know, I mean, this was a much more, for a reasonably large university at the time, it was a much more intimate environment. And that was a real good thing. It really was. And there were a bunch of people. Margaret Brooks I got to know very, very well. We became very close to. Never had any classes under her. It was true of a bunch of people.
Clarence just passed away recently.
I know. We were Facebook friends actually.
Oh, okay.
And his son was now friended me after that, and so we kind of keep in touch. Steve, I think it is. Yeah, he was a really good man. There were a bunch of them. Alex Osperlot. I think can't think of all the names now, but there was the thing about that period at OSU was that I think this happens now and then places where there's just this coincidence of where interesting people end up being someplace at the same time, and that the students as well as the faculty, there was just an extraordinary collection of interesting, thoughtful students. There was a guy named John G Nicola who was a philosophy major. He's from New York City. How he ended up at OSU, I have no idea. And John was also an influence for me. I was this naive kid, and John was a couple of years older, I think, from New York City, and he was a real character. He used to say, people ask me what I'm going to do with philosophy as a major. He says, what are you going to do without one? So Chick Dambach, who I talked about, Chick was another one. He came here to play football. That's what brought him here. And then he got injured. But he became a real star here. And a lot of other people, and other places later in his life. And there were just a bunch of people like that. Ken Doms, Bill Strait, and Hank Hankla, who was on the Student Senate from the IFC, raised in Boise City, Oklahoma. A lot of the people who were here in that period and got involved were from tiny little towns. And, it was an enormous change for them from where they came from. Intellectually and in their minds and their attitudes and their politics. It was just amazing. Another quick story, Maurice Stein was a well-known sociologist, and he taught at Brandeis, and he came here to speak. We group of us stayed after, and sat at his feet, and complained again, oh, we're stuck here in Oklahoma, it'd be so much better to be in a place like Brandeis, and he chided us, and he said no, he said, here you're experiencing reality, you don't, you have to really struggle, for your beliefs and to pursue them. He said at Brandeis, the kids will decide one day that they're against the war. The second day they'll go out and demonstrate against it, and on the third day they're surprised it didn't end. Now, that was an exaggeration, but he was making a point, and it was true. When I did leave Oklahoma and went to Chicago, CTS was the Chicago Theological Seminary where I went, was right next to University of Chicago, and this was 1968. At one point, the administration building was taken over. And anyway, when I first got there, I'm going, oh my gosh, I landed in heaven. Everybody had long hair, everybody was against the war, and for civil rights, and blah, blah, blah. And then after a while, when I got to know the place better, I realized that there, having long hair, being against the war, and for civil rights, was pretty much what being in a fraternity was here, which is to say, it's what you did. There was no struggle to get to where they were. And everybody that I knew at OSU who went through that period, very difficult period, and developed commitments, kept those commitments the rest of their lives. And everybody that I ever was able to stay in touch with, all of them were doing really good things. They weren't trying to make as much money as they could, not that they weren't successful, but they pursued careers and activities to try to make the world a better place. And it was because of what happened here, the process that we all went through.
Well, now, when you first get here, Oliver Willem is president.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
And do you remember anything about
No.
the administration or? Okay. But then in 1966, Robert Comm, who was former Dean of Arts and Sciences, is named the new president. Mm-hmm. And he's the first real, we've had two presidents in the previous 40 years, so, but he's not from an ag background.
Right.
Comes out of Arts and Sciences and Student Services, actually, was his background even before that. How did the campus atmosphere change with the appointment?
Well, I mean, everybody I knew was just thrilled, and I knew him a little bit from the Wesley Foundation, because he was Methodist and had some involvement there. The campus ministers there were thrilled. The head of the Sociology Department, Gerald Leslie, was thrilled. I mean, it was, because Arts and Science president. So initially, there was just this excitement about it. But
what happened?
well, there were a series of things that happened. There was a relatively small group of people. I mean, I think we all knew each other, who'd gotten involved in pro-civil rights stuff and anti-war activities on campus, and it was really a small group. And there was and I can't remember all of the different grievances that people had, but I remember what the precipitating event was, and that is that the Oklahoma Civil Liberties Union wanted to hold a convention at the student union, and they weren't allowed to because they were too controversial. And
who stopped them from meeting there?
I don't know if it was the student union leadership. I think it was. But
Abe Hesser, sure. I think, would have been director.
Yeah, I think he would have been. I think that's right.
Okay.
And there were some graduate students, Ann Schneider and Beverly Goodman, maybe. They were both poli-sci students. They called a meeting at the student union to talk about it. They were so upset about it. And I'm going, oh, I don't know those people. That's interesting, And we'll go, and we went expecting there to be, 20 or 30 people there, and the room was overflowing.
When was this?
I'm not sure. It was probably '66.
Okay.
I assume it might have been '67. It was winter. I remember that because it snowed.
It was after Comm had been appointed.
Yeah, he was
within
president.
about a year or so.
Yeah, and and there was a decision to hold a rally about free speech and that sort of thing, and academic freedom, and you know, there were flyers printed up and we distributed, and I thought, okay, yeah, we'll do it, but you know, nothing's going to happen, you know. And it was scheduled for the front of the library, you know, and on the lawn. And
was that a common meeting place for?
We'd never had anything like that.
Never had. Okay, so
not that I know of.
Okay.
And 400 people showed up, which was like, whoa! I mean, nobody expected that. And there were speakers. Oh gosh, David Block and Terry Denton. Wow, I can't believe I remember these names. I can't remember who all I spoke. I have no memory of what I said or anybody else did, but you know. And there were some faculty speak, and then it got really interesting because and Dr. Kahn was out of town, I think, that day. And he came back and he was furious about this happening on his campus. And he called in 4 department heads to his office. Political science, history, philosophy, and sociology, because there were people, either faculty or graduate assistants, had been involved in the rally from those 4 departments, or at least that's what he was told. So he called them into his office, and he told them that they were to hold staff, faculty, and meetings of faculty and graduate assistants, and inform them they were not to be involved in such activities in the future, and if they were, they would risk, if they were graduate assistants, they would risk losing their assistantship. If they were regular faculty, they would risk losing their job. And if they were tenured faculty, they would be risk losing, you know, being frozen in their current position. Well, the 4 department heads were all sort of, did he really say this, you know? And 3 of them decided just to do nothing, figuring he would think better of it, you know, and it would go away, you know? But Sayre, I think, Dr. Sayre, I think was his name for political science.
Harold Sayre.
Yeah, and the the other thing was that these instructions were to come from them, you know, not from him. And Sayre held a meeting, and that's where Ann Schneider and Beverly were. They were in political science. He held a meeting and told them. He also told them that Kahn had told him to do it. And Ann was just, I mean, they were terrified, you know, of losing their assistantship.
Sayre was also a Methodist here.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the next part is really weird because we were so conservative about things. I mean, we didn't want to be perceived as being radicals or, you know, Berkeley type free speech movement or anything like that. And you know, we really wanted to be responsible, you know, and so much so that there was going to be a second rally, and it came off, but nobody knew what had happened. Very few people. I found out from Ann. I went to Dr. Leslie, the head of the Sociology Department, and confronted him about it. And I said, "Did this happen?" And he just sunk down in his chair. And he goes, "Oh God!" You know, he didn't say anything. He hoped that it would go away, and he was just aghast because he was a big supporter of the president's, and he could not believe that this had happened. You know. And so there was a second rally. 2,000 people showed up, even though. I mean, I suspect there were rumors, you know, something had happened, but no, they didn't know what. You know, we didn't tell people.
At the library again?
Yeah.
Okay.
2,000 people. I couldn't believe it. Well, at this rally, David Larson, who was a sociology professor, announced his resignation at the rally. And he made references to, without being specific about what had happened. And then and then it just really got, oh, and the other thing that happened was, we had, a group of us had gone to Dr. Scales, who was then the head of Arts and Sciences, and who was, gosh, he was good. Lost there. Anyway, went to him to talk to him about this, and he was a very political guy in a sense. He was very careful about how he did things, and he you know, he didn't say you know, I don't remember the whole conversation, but at one point, you know, he said, well, you know, you're exercising your right of free speech, good for you, you know. And I think that, I think Con was going to be out of town. Yeah, he was going to be out, he was out of town for that rally, I think. And he had instructed Scales to sort of keep his eye on it or whatever. Something like that. Anyway, the rumors, you know, the rumor got around about what had happened. And when Larson resigned, I mean, that was a big deal. And you have to understand, the Sociology Department at that time was like a crown jewel at OSU in Arts and Sciences. Wesley had brought in just a really top-notch group of professors. And it had a great reputation. And it really was something that the university bragged about. At the end of that semester, I guess it was, every single member of the sociology department, except for G Nicola, who was on leave to get his PhD. He was the only non-PhD.
He was at the University of Missouri getting his PhD.
Yeah. And resigned en masse, the entire department. Scales resigned and became president of Wake Forest.
Mm-hmm.
There were a bunch of people. I think Klaus Heverly from history resigned. I mean, it was big. Anyway, so there, you know, word got around about what had happened, and I think it was the Arts and Science Faculty Council created a committee to investigate these rumors, and Margaret Brooks was put in charge of it.
And Margaret is the head of the Honors College at the time.
She was a botany professor and head of the honors program, and her husband was an ag professor. So, you know, really radical traditions. And Dr. Brooks was just a really honored person and honorable. She really was. She was great. And so they conducted an investigation, and she wrote up a report. Only when they went to present it, it was squelched. I don't remember exactly how, but it was, and so people didn't see it. And she was told that she had to sit on it, you know, and could not release it. And
who told her to sit on it?
You know, I know Dan Wesley was involved. He was the one. My understanding is that he's the one who finally went to her, because she had tenure. You couldn't fire her. And so he went, and my understanding is that Wesley went to her and told her that if she didn't resign, that they would close down the honors program. Because they knew that was her love. That was her primary love right then. And she was just adored by the honor students. So she resigned. And many of the honor students left also after that semester.
Did she stay on in botany?
No,
she resigned from the university.
She had to resign from the university. That was what was required. She went over, and then she taught at OCU after that. And I saw her years later, and she was like a shadow of herself. I mean, it was a horrible thing for her. I mean, as upset as I am about other aspects of that period, and the sort of the principles of free speech and everything else, what they did to Margaret Brooks was just.
So who sent Dan Wesley? He wouldn't.
Com did.
So Com.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, and it was just. And she had become also the advisor to the Student Senate And so the Student Senate all got to know her, and they were, there had been, this was actually would have been the fall of '67. It started, I think, in the spring of '67, and then the fall, the rallies, and then in the fall, there was a student senate election, student government election, and David Harris and G Doris ran as a reformed slate with a group of student senators. And Tom Lucas and Bob Swaffer ran as the establishment slate and won. It was a close election, I think, but anyway, they won. But so the student senate going into to that fall year was not. It was an establishment student senate for the most part. By the end of that semester, it was not. Yeah, and I think that what happened with Dr. Brooks was the thing that brought a lot of people off of the sidelines on this, because they knew her, and they knew what was happening to her, and it wasn't theoretical anymore. It wasn't free speech. It was a human being who was being persecuted, because of this investigation, and she wouldn't be quiet about it. So after I left, the student senate called an all-campus meeting, and and everybody, the fraternities and sororities got people out and everything. I think this is all in that in those materials that I gave you. There's some speeches and stuff, I think. And so it was just, it went from the way it all snowballed. It's a little like, if you think about Watergate, and they say, the cover-up is where they get you, and if it hadn't been, none of this had to happen. It just was so unnecessary. And the Board of Regents got involved, in supporting President Kahn. A group of us went out and tried to meet with members of the Board of Regents to talk to them about it, and those of us who, everybody came from a conservative family pretty much, and they just couldn't understand, what's going on here. I talked to my mom, and she just didn't understand, and I know that's true of Hank and probably everybody. It was a hard thing to do. This was not a it wasn't. This was not the sort of thing where, let's get on the bandwagon kind of thing at all. It was risky business, and it was people had to think long and hard about it.
The Oklahoma legislature got involved.
Oh yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about the campus speakers policy. In 1967, the Religious Emphasis Week.
Yeah, Thomas Alzheimer
was invited to come speak, and then his invitation was withdrawn.
Yeah, and the irony of this is that Thomas Alzheimer is actually a pretty conservative theologian. However, he'd written a book, the title of which was God is Dead, which was a provocative title, but did not represent what was in the book at all. It was really talking about how we have killed God by not doing. He wasn't even a radical theologian, but the book title was provocative, and Dr. Kalm, my recollection is that Dr. Kalm specifically, refused to allow him to speak. And that was the beginning of the speakers issues, and there were others, and I don't remember even who they were, but there were two people who had been invited to come and didn't. One was Henry Steele Commager, and the other was John Kenneth Galbraith. And Galbraith was going to come, and two student senators who I think were also on the Speakers Committee, Ken Doms and Bill Streck, sent a letter to Galbraith asking him not to come.
Who had invited him to come?
I don't even know. I don't know. It may have been the speakers. I don't know. It may be that they invited him and then decided, regretted it. That things had escalated. I don't know that.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the original group, but they were really upset that he didn't come. Because I guess they had spent a year prepping this thing, getting him
Might have been
ready.
the economics department.
And then all of a sudden, so go on. So two gentlemen contact Kenneth Galbraith, informing him of the controversies
Yeah,
going on
and
here.
he wrote a letter, and you know how the original of it, a letter where he appreciated them telling him, and you know he supported what they were doing and stuff, but he was going to come anyway. And I don't know if they contacted him again or not. They had sent him a file. I mean, it was like this thick, that documented what had been going on campus, including with Dr. Brooks. I mean, it's the closest thing to a written history, I think, that exists of documenting that period. And I didn't even realize that I had it. Ken, I think, must have given it to me at one of these reunions that I mentioned, one of these kindred spirit reunions we had. And that's where I got the Galbraith letter and telegram. Anyway, so Galbraith, for whatever reason, reconsidered and decided he wasn't going to go, and so he sent a telegram announcing that and saying, you know, you can use this in any way you want to publicize it.
So did they rewrite the campus speakers policy?
No, you know, after I left, we held a couple of kindred spirit reunions, and I think it was the second one. We were welcomed, officially welcomed on campus, which was cute, and we stayed in the student union hotel. And when I checked in, I wish I could remember his name, but there was a guy who had been there when I was there. He wasn't the head of it at that point. I don't know if he was head of the union or the union hotel. But
Norman Moore?
No.
No? Okay.
Anyway, and I remember him. He was the guy who would go around if you had your feet up on a table in the French room or something, you know, he'd tell you to put it down and all that stuff. And anyway, I get there, and he apparently remembered me, or at least he knew why we were there, and he was really friendly, and he said his name is Lou Bullock, I think.
Lou Bullock was actively involved with some of the suits.
Yeah. So he said, is Lou Bullock coming? And I said, I don't know who that is. And he said, well, he should be here. And he's now a prominent civil liberties lawyer in Tulsa. And so I checked in, went in my room and looked him up, you know, called him and told him about what we were doing. And he came. And on the Saturday night of people sort of traded, you know, just talked about things. And he got I'm going to get emotional here, but because, you know, when I left Oklahoma,
And you left in 68.
To go to seminary, and when I left Oklahoma, I was never coming back, you know, and I just felt like all the stuff that had happened at OSU was just for nothing, you know. I mean, you know, everybody left, and it was just, and nothing changed, you know. It just felt like we failed, and so Lou Bullock gets up and he says, I don't know anybody in this room, and you don't know me, but I knew your names, and I knew what you did, and you were my inspiration. And he became, I think he was head of the student body, and he sued the university over the speaker's policy. And that was the beginning of him going to law school and becoming a prominent civil liberties lawyer. And he thanked us.
You see, after you left, I mean, 68 was a tough year. You had the assassinations of King and Robert Kennedy.
And I got married that summer. Yeah, it was a very tough year. And
But
riots in Chicago. I know it was a tough year.
But they revised the campus speakers policy to a certain extent. The regents had signed off on a new campus speakers policy. So then, I think it was in 68 or 69, the students, of course, tested right away. They tried to bring in Timothy Leary. and he's rejected.
Surprise.
Surprise. And they tried to bring in Philip Berrigan. He can't come.
Oh, yeah.
Adam Clayton Powell. Sorry, he can't come. So they kept, you know, kind of pushing the powers that be Finally, in '69, Abby Hoffman is allowed to come.
Really?
This was just a few months after he'd been convicted as a part of Chicago 7. But he is allowed to come, and he gives a presentation in Gallagher, Iowa in 1969. But there was a real reaction both from the legislature again, the regents again, COM again, but they started having people. Jerry Rubin then was invited and came, and then eventually.
The first group was a lot better group.
Well,
some of them anyway.
But do you remember Sexpo '68?
No.
There was a group, and they had to meet off campus, but in 1968, summer of '68, fall of '68, they had various speakers, and some of the churches sponsored these individuals, but on sex education and sexual mores and that kind of stuff, which was also kind of controversial, but it was held off campus because they couldn't get facilities on campus to do that. So it really kind of, what you did enabled or empowered later students to continue to kind of test the waters, push the administration.
Well, and when Lou said that, I mean, it had a profound effect on me, not just because of that, but it illustrated that you don't know, what the consequences are going to be, even if you seem to fail, but you don't know the lives that are touched and the ripples, that are sent out from that, and that usually you never find out. The only reason I knew, was because the person at the student union told me his name and suggested that he come. I mean, how weird is that? It just, and everybody was moved by that who was there. It was a big deal. And the rest of my life after that, it was a lesson to me, a lesson in life, that never assume, that something you did failed, because you don't know that.
You were just planting seeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that, it made all those years feel different.
What pressures do you think were on Dr. Com? I mean, why was he making the choices? You don't know, but I mean, what do you think some of the pressures on Dr. Com were?
Initially there weren't any. I don't think there were any pressures on him initially from that 400-person rally. It was just him.
Okay.
I think he was a very conservative guy, it turned out. He ended up running for the Senate, and you can be in arts and sciences and be conservative, be reactionary, and he was. And nobody realized it because he hadn't been in a position to demonstrate that. There hadn't been anything come across his desk as head of the Arts and Sciences College that brought that out of it. That was my sense. I remember having a conversation with him after that. It didn't go anywhere, and it was, a couple of us went to talk to him because I knew him a little, and he knew me, from the Wesley Foundation. I thought, well, maybe there can be a connection here, and there wasn't. Eventually, sure, the newspapers picked up all this stuff, and we don't want a Berkeley at OSU and all this. So sure, there was, and the Board of Regents. What I remember about the Board of Regents was, I hope this is not true anymore, but at that time, this is what I was told. I think it's true. There was essentially one requirement to be on the Board of Regents. And that is that the majority of the Board of Regents had to be working farmers.
That's true.
They didn't have to have a college degree. But they
had to be from that district, because it was by the district, so they had to be from a specific district, but then they had to get a certain percentage of their income, had to be from agricultural production of some kind.
And so, that's you get a Board of Regents that's selected that way, it's not terribly shocking, that they would be upset to have people on college campuses raising difficult questions and all that kind of stuff. It's not at all surprising. What you need is a president who can be a buffer for that. And Dr. Com certainly was not. He was quite happy to, I mean, Kahn made a speech against, in those papers, I mean, there were newspaper articles, he made a speech in Kansas or somewhere saying that SDS was responsible for the stuff going on campus. Well, I can tell you, I mean, I was a member of SDS, and SDS at OSU was like Young Democrats at the University of Michigan. I mean, what passed for radicalism at that time, most of the members of SDS were that way. There were a couple that were not important members, but who were a little crazy. But it was you know, we were against the war, and there wasn't any other place, you know, to do that. And we were against the war and pro-civil rights, and SDS became, at this campus, a place where people could do that. So it was not radical at all. It really wasn't.
Do you remember how many students were
In
members?
SDS?
Uh-huh.
Oh, it was maybe a dozen.
Okay.
A friend of mine ended up, apparently there was a, you know, he claimed later that one of the people who was involved, and who was in fact one of the most inflammatory members, was apparently a plant. And there were, I mean, it was just, it was inconsequential. You know, it was completely inconsequential. And G Nicola was my mentor. He's the reason I was a sociology major. I had taken a couple of his classes, and we were friends. I mean, I knew him, I had a closer relationship with him than I did any other faculty member. And he was on leave, you know, during this, for a sabbatical. Leslie had told him he had to get a PhD or he couldn't teach here, and he didn't really want one. And I had an incomplete in one of his classes when he was teaching, and I was supposed to do a paper. So I took the paper over to his home, and to give it to him when all this was going on. And his wife was there, and she started ranting about stuff on campus and saying it was all communist. And she mentioned three organizations or activities. One was the drummer, one was SDS, and the other was the Student Faculty Association, which was the group that, I mean, it wasn't really a group, but you know, that put on the rallies. And I said to her, I know one person who was involved in the leadership of those three organizations, and he's sitting in your living room right now. I said, are you calling me a communist? Because G knew me, you know? And she said, oh no, you're just a dupe. You know, I'm like, oh my God. It was sad because, you know, I really liked the guy, you know? And of course he became head of the department as the sole remaining member.
Right. Who was it? You remember who the advisor was for the SDS?
Yeah, it was Clemens, philosophy professor. He wasn't into it. You know, it was just we needed an advisor.
Right.
And he was a good guy. He left too, incidentally.
Right. He was called in by Com.
I didn't
at
know
some
that.
point.
I didn't know that. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And he went to, I think, Toronto somewhere. I really liked him a lot. He was. I did have him for a teacher. He was really good.
And like you mentioned, Scales went on to Wake Forest. So.
There was a secret meeting. I think there were probably a number of them. I don't know. After he went to Wake Forest, several of us got in my car and drove to Tulsa, where he was at some conference or something. It was really weird. He had a close relationship with Oral Roberts. I don't know if you knew that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you imagine that? Is that weird? He did. They were friends. Anyway, so we arranged through somebody, you know, to meet with him at his hotel in Tulsa and to seek his advice, you know, about what can we do, you know, and because he was supportive in a very careful way, you know, not in a disloyal way to Com or anything, but he couldn't stomach what was going on, you know. Even, I mean, he thought that the rallies were great, you know. Get people talking, you know. I mean, that's what universities are for, you know, exchange of ideas, all that, you know, battle it out. And you know, and he was in an untenable position here, you know, so he left. And good for Wake Forest, you know.
I know of only 2 previous rallies on the library lawn. One, not really a rally, a gathering, was when John Kennedy was assassinated in November of '63. There was a group that met at the library lawn, and then Cobb's inaugural was on the library lawn. Do you remember that at all?
I didn't. I'd forgotten that. There also were some other things that happened on the lawn that were not. There were things called provo picnics. In fact, there's a picture, I think, in one of the yearbooks of a provo picnic, and it was an idea somebody picked up from some other campus, and the idea was you just come and you bring lunch and you sit out on the lawn and you socialize. Really radical. The the campus police went out and took pictures.
So when did that start? 66, 67?
It was right in that area.
Okay.
And you know, and gosh, I can almost remember his name. It was head of the campus police. Anyway, they were out taking pictures of people at the provo picnic. It was just, they had no idea, you know. All of this was just so foreign to them that it was a threat, because it wasn't what they were used to. It wasn't normal, you know. It was just kids out. They weren't doing anything. They were just talking, you know, and eating, sitting on a lawn and eating. It was.
Do you remember the hedges with the thorny? They're hedges with thorns. They had about a 2.5-inch thorn on them.
Yeah.
That were planted along the sidewalks.
Yeah.
As a crowd control.
Oh. Well, there was one incident that happened after I left. I had a very close friend named George DeWoody, and he was there after I left, and he was, I don't remember what this was about, but there was, you know how they would do these stenciled things for different events on the sidewalks? I think they were going to reinstitute the provo picnics or something. It was something, you know, really threatening like that. But they couldn't get permission to do that, so that night they crept onto campus and they were going to do a similar thing, you know, publicizing the provo picnic, I think it was. And all of a sudden, all these lights came on. Somebody had informed the campus police that they were going to be doing it, and they were waiting for them. And according to George, there were guns drawn. I mean, it's just, you know, it was just really strange.
Did you ever see any acts of violence
No,
or
God.
conflict?
Oh, God.
Being, you know.
No, people didn't even scream or anything. I mean, I literally never, here's the only time that I ever heard of anybody mentioning anything about violence, okay? There was one guy who was in SDS, his name was Mac Eakes, and he was a loony. Nobody took him seriously. And he was just very, you know, over the top. Anyway, and he, at that time, was rooming with Jim Gunlock, who was a friend of mine. And they were talking. No, Eakes was talking to somebody else in some restaurant. And Hubert Humphrey was coming to campus as vice president. And Eakes just says something about somebody should plant a bomb. You know, and Mac Eakes never did anything. I mean, anything, useful or not. You know, it was just him popping off to somebody. You know, somebody ought to do that. Well, somebody heard it, and Jim Gunlock, who was his roommate and who had been in the Army and had experience with demolitions in the Army, he didn't even know Mac had said this. And he gets a visit from the Secret Service.
The U.S. Secret Service.
Yeah, because Humphrey was coming, he was vice president, and word got to him, and you know, that's what they should do, you know.
Right.
So they investigated this, and Jim he was so furious. because he'd gotten in trouble because of this idiot, just saying something stupid. That's literally the only time I ever heard anybody or heard of anybody proposing, talking about anything that could be considered violence. Ever. No, it was, we were so, God, the drummer, if you compare the drummer to any other off-campus publication, because I went around and looked at them, this was so mild, I mean, really, everything was. It was just, there was nothing to get excited about. I mean, by getting excited, they just fanned the flames. I mean, it was just really stupid.
Let me give you some other names, folks. George Grease came in as Arts and Sciences Dean after Scales left, so he must have left right after you got here. Abe Hesser was... That's
who was head of the student union.
He was head of the student union? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So he was the one who mentioned the Lewis Bullock to you, or?
No. Oh, Hesser was gone.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
There was another guy at the student union that I can kind of picture, who again was not the one who mentioned this, that came after Hesser, and I kind of liked, I didn't like Hesser, but I kind of liked.
Well, Norman Moore was director of the union for a while after Hesser. I'm not sure.
I don't remember the name, but it might have been. Anyway.
Okay. Will Hammonds.
No, don't know that name.
Supposedly, he was a graduate student and then visiting faculty in journalism and broadcasting, who helped provide printing resources.
Sounds like Bill Harmon.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bill
Harmon, yeah.
Harmon.
Oh yeah,
Harmon.
I knew Bill real well.
Okay, tell me about Bill Harmon.
He was just a journalist. I mean, he really was he was what journalists are supposed to be. And he was behind the scenes, he was supportive of the drummer. Actually, there was another guy who was a student, Enoch Needham, was the assistant editor of the O'Colly. And Enoch, he actually wrote some stuff for us, under a pseudonym or something. Enoch was great. He tried to do stuff with the O'Colly. I mean, he had articles in the O'Colly that, and Harmon was I think he was the student advisor. I mean, the faculty advisor of the O'Colly, I think. No, Bill was great, and he left as well. I don't remember if it was around this stuff. I think he got in trouble at one point somehow, but I don't remember. I think I had a conversation with him after he left one time, but no, he was one of my favorite people here. He was really good. He was a journalist, go after the story, and and I mean, he was a really good guy.
He ended up at Southern Illinois.
Yeah,
that's where he went.
That's right.
My understanding was that he had provided support in some fashion for like the drummer to be published. I guess none of the local printers, at least initially, were willing to print it. Do you know where the drummer was printed?
I'm trying to remember. I think we had to take it to Edmond or someplace. I think it was not in Stillwater. And we, this was the old days, and we would type everything out and then cut it into strips and glue it onto these mock-ups. I mean, it was a big production putting that thing out. It really was. And we sold ads and didn't make any money, but we sort of covered the cost pretty much. And I don't remember whether Bill. It's possible. I mean, he certainly gave us moral support, and he was not antagonistic in the least, which meant a lot, frankly. Just like Enoch. And there was the editor. I'm trying to remember her name. I can't remember. She wasn't antagonistic, but she was just, she didn't want to rock and roll. Enoch did.
What kind of numbers would you print? How many issues?
Oh, I have no memory of that.
Okay.
No memory at all.
How were they distributed?
Well, for a long time they were distributed on campus. I think in boxes or something. And then they were banned. We couldn't do it. And I don't remember what we did then. I think maybe, I just don't remember how we distributed.
Did the Methodist Student Center distribute any of them?
Yeah.
Or something like the?
Yeah, we would have them places like that.
Places like that around campus.
Yeah.
Hideaway, do you remember?
Oh, I remember the Hideaway. I don't think we distributed them there. In fact, that's where I think I'm gonna have lunch. I think it's the only place left. We would go over, the Hideaway would be one of the places we would go to discuss, plot, whatever. Yeah, it was quite the place.
In the old Hideaway, the little one on the.
Yeah. And with a collage on the wall. We had a collage on the wall of the drummer office, what became the drummer office, where we lived. And one time Julian Bond came to speak. And somebody, don't remember who, Wade Martin maybe, brought him over after the speech over to the drummer office, and he autographed our wall. That was fun.
So where was this office?
I think the address. I think I came across I'm digitizing all of our photos and old documents and stuff, and that's how I came across the stuff that Ken had given me. And I think somewhere it had the address. I think it was 1311 West 3rd Street, I think, something like that. But the building's gone. Yeah. It was just this, and people rented out their houses, and we were there for a couple of years at least. Different people at different times.
Were you the first? Did you first get involved with the drummer when it first started, or?
Yeah. I wasn't I was the religion editor initially. And I had edited a publication out of the Wesley Foundation called Challenger 2, and which dealt with issues, and we would have people write articles about one thing or another. And I think it included some critiques about campus stuff. And then there was another publication coming out of, I wish I could remember the residence hall, but I can't. And I can't remember the name of it. I think maybe it was the Beeline was the name of the publication. Is there a dorm that starts with a B? It was a men's dorm.
Well, Bennett Hall.
No, that was women's dorm. Anyway, I don't remember. But anyway, there was this one hall, residence hall, where people collected, who were interested in that kind of stuff, and they published this thing. And somebody came up with the bright idea of having a real off-campus newspaper, and the people who were involved in those two things both got together for it. And the first editor was Dennis Durbin, and then he graduated, and then I became the editor after that.
Did you feel like there wasn't appropriate coverage in the Daily Collegian for what you're?
No. No, it was. And they didn't talk about. We had articles about the war in Vietnam. We had articles about, just current events. It wasn't focused initially. I don't think it wasn't like it was all about problems at OSU or anything. That was included. The idea was to have a publication that talked about important issues, and with opinions. And we also had humor and art. We had a column that a guy named Glenn, I can't remember his name. It was titled Elijah the Student, and it was written. And we had a picture of Khalil Gibran, I think it was, as the supposed Elijah, and then he would do these humorous columns. They were really quite good, as I recall. Be interesting to go back and read them. But we had that. There was the art. We had an art section, and Larry Wharton was the head of that. And that was the most provocative thing actually, the drummer, because Larry was very into art that very suggestive art having to do with female anatomy. And although a lot of it was kind of abstract, but I figured out what it was. And he liked being provocative. That was actually the most radical thing about the drummer, probably. you know, for that time.
Artists and cartoonists often
Yeah.
are
And my wife,
Pushing it.
or woman who became my wife, you know, wrote an article about, I think it was a book that Ted, you know, it was a review of a book that I think Ted Sorensen had written. You know, did stuff like that. It was not, well, you know, you can read them. I mean, it's just not, it wasn't that, it was really tame.
her name?
Judy Stevens. Judy wrote it in. We met at the drummer. Her roommate, she was from Bartlesville, and her roommate, they were roommates here, they were close friends in high school. And her roommate, Carol, heard about the drummer from somebody, and she dragged Judy over to the office. And I married Judy, and Jim Gunlock married Carol. They were freshmen, and we weren't. That was my last semester here and her first. So.
Okay. Ken Doms and Bill Streck.
Yeah.
How did you know them?
Well, they were in the student senate, and Ken was a poli-sci major, I think. I don't remember what Streck. I think Streck may have been pre-med or something. I'm not sure. I don't remember how I actually met them. Probably just from those of us who, you know, I think especially with the drummer. The drummer was really well known on campus among a certain set of people like Bill and Ken. And we were not initially friends. They were, you know, more establishment. And as part of what I mean, there were people who really weren't inclined to rock the boat. They were serious people, and they really were. They weren't, you know, serious about serious issues and stuff. But they, you know, they were really good students, you know, and that was their focus, you know, was school. And I think initially they probably didn't really. I don't know if they looked down on those of us who were activists or not, but they weren't. They certainly wouldn't have considered themselves activists initially. But you know, they got drug into it. And you know, and Hank was my best example. You know, because he was the IFC Interfraternity Council senator, and Hank, I watched him change dramatically. He was really pretty darn conservative originally, and Hank went on after that. Practiced law in D.C. area. He's a real dyed-in-the-wool liberal Democrat who is. We're friends on Facebook, and I feel politically, you know, in terms of core values and stuff. I think I'm not sure that I have any friends like that who I feel closer to. You know, in terms of our values. We you know, one of us would write something, and then the other one would comment and, you know, like it and stuff. I mean, it was amazing how often that happened. Boise City, you know, and I'll see, he's still Facebook friends with a lot of the people he grew up with. And they get into these discussions, oh my God, you know, because these are really, really right-wing people, you know, who think Obama's Kenyan, and I mean, you know, it's just very. And he's still in touch with Chick's same way. Chick, you know, stayed in touch with people like that, and I'll see the same thing happen there. He's close friends with Jim Click, who's a big auto dealer. I think he must have been on the football team here. I think that's how Chick knew him. And he was one of Bush's top fundraisers, you know, W's. And they're buddies, you know. Politically, don't have anything.
At least they're keeping the lines of communication open.
Yeah, and Chick's great at that. He really is. He's the best networker I've ever known in my life. I'm a pretty good networker, but he's outstanding.
So what drove Ken and Bill to contact John Kenneth Galbraith?
I mean, it was the speaker's policy. They were really upset about it.
So they finally reached the point where
they wanted to dramatize it. Yeah, and I mean, first there was an effort, you know, just to get change done internally, going through channels and all that stuff. And instead of that having a good effect, it seemed to make things worse. You know, there was just this overreaction after overreaction. And then finally people said, screw it, you know, we got to do something about this. I mean, you know, who was it? I mean, they're, you know, OSU was blacklisted.
AAUP.
Yeah, AAUP. Yeah, because of this stuff. You know, I mean, it was. Some people, you know, people wanted to help from outside because they couldn't get it inside, and they sure weren't going to get it from the state legislature or the regents.
Well, see, the state legislature passed a bill. I'm not sure what, restricting use of campus facilities by certain speaker types, which even the Attorney General said was unconstitutional.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop them from, you know, trying to interfere with
Right.
the activities going on here.
Yeah.
So.
And you know, and the really sad thing about this is the brain drain that occurred for Oklahoma because of what happened here on campus, because those people never came back. And I don't think that would have been true of a lot of them. I mean, all of those people, I mean, KY, just a long list of people, you know, the honor students, faculty members, you know, there's people who grew up here in small towns, you know, and who were proud Okies, you know, left. And you know, like me, vowed they'd never come back. And that's not insignificant, because it was a really smart group of people and talented, and they went on to do great things, you know, somewhere else. Could have been here.
So you would have missed then, like the black student protests, which occurred a few years later.
Yeah.
The residence hall issues with the visitation and open door,
Well,
closed door policy.
Well, those, I mean, that was an issue, and I don't know if we ever had it in the drum or not, but that was certainly an issue. If you were a woman, you had your purse inspected when and you couldn't wear slacks in the library. I mean, you know, it was yeah, and the residence halls, you know, I mean, you couldn't go. You know, there was a lobby, and that's as far as you could go, and you call up, and the girls had to come down, and the whole thing. I assume that OSU now has mixed dorms and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, like everywhere else does, you know. And amazingly, you know, the world didn't come to an end, you know.
Well, but like the women's residence halls had different hours than the men's residence halls.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and if you were, I think if you were a male, you could live off campus. But if you were a female, you couldn't, at least until you were 21, I think. So, yeah, it was just.
Right, well, that came after.
Yeah.
So you had left by the time Kent State happened.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That was in '68.
I think so.
Okay.
I don't remember when in '68 it was, and I don't remember if I was here. I certainly remember Kent State, but I don't remember if I was here or in Chicago. I think it might have been in the spring, actually. No, yeah, I think it might have been spring. No, wait, '68. No, I left, that's right. If it was in '68, I would have missed it, because I left here in January '68, so yeah.
Looking back, do you think there were changes going on demographically? Oklahoma was becoming more urbanized, and that, like you said, the regents were still representing these kind of rural, agrarian areas. Do you think, you know, with the baby boomers coming in, more urban backgrounds, more people coming in from out of state, do you think that had any impact on it?
I don't think so. I mean, because, like I said, you know, Hank was from somebody else was from Sepulpa. I mean, the people involved in this were Oklahomans. Chick was from Ohio, but Chick came to it kind of late. I mean, he became a very important player. He's an interesting story, because when we like I said, there was this small group, and we all knew each other. And then we started hearing about this guy who would go in and wear a jacket and tie and into dorms and debate people on Vietnam. What? Being against the war. And it was Chick, and he had gotten involved with the debate team. Dale Stockton was the debate coach, and it was a really, really interesting guy. And Chick adored him. He became a mentor for Chick. And incredibly, the OSU debate team, when they would go to debate contests, their specialty was the war in Vietnam and the U.S. should get out, if you can imagine that. That was OSU's debate team's specialty. And Chick was a really good debater, and he decided that he would take it into the dorms.
Uh-huh.
And he eventually became, I think, head of the Speakers Bureau, whatever it was called. He's an extraordinary guy. But he was from out of state. I mentioned you when we were talking earlier, G Nicola, but he never was involved in this stuff. I mean, I don't recall anybody else. Ann Schneider, one of the two people who got all that first rally started. She's from small town in Oklahoma, and I think Beverly, the other one, I think she was from out of state. But no, I mean I think it was just the time, and like I said, as things escalated, people who were not interested in getting involved got involved. I mean, they might not have ever done anything like that. Maybe Dr. Kahn did us all a favor, by challenging, people and them having to sort of rise to the occasion. I don't know. I think it was, and obviously everybody knew what was going on under the college campuses. The war, and the war was real, very real, and so I think. I think it was just circumstances, and I think there just were a lot of really, really interesting people here all at once. There is a book. One of my favorite books is a book by Taylor Branch. It's actually 3 volumes. The first one's titled "Parting the Waters," and it's America in civil rights years. The Martin Luther King civil rights years. It's not just about civil rights. It's an extraordinary, and he won all sorts of prizes. But I read the first volume. It was like 1,000 pages long, and it was like it was a page turner. And I remember one of the lessons I learned from that. One of the themes was that major change, only occurs when 2 things happen. One is there has to be something in the way of an opportunity arises, and the other is there has to be the right leadership to take advantage of the opportunity. You can have the opportunity, but without the right leader, in this case King. You can have the right leader, but without the opportunity. I mean, King got dragged into the civil rights movement. He never sought to be part of it. He was just a preacher, And I think that's true about a lot of things. And I think what happened at OSU was the coincidence of events taking place and the right people being there to respond to it, whether it was Ann Schneider or Ken Dons or Chick Dambach or
Margaret Brooks.
Yeah, I mean, it was just it was an extraordinary period with, I think, extraordinary people. I really do.
Okay. So you leave, you vow you're never coming back.
Mm-hmm. Well, so live.
Well, so what happened after you left? What
did I do?
What did you do?
Well, I went to seminary and discovered pretty quickly that I really didn't want to be in graduate school.
But why had you gone to seminary?
Well, I was originally actually going to go into the Peace Corps. I'd thought about graduate school in sociology, which was actually the least interesting to me. Peace Corps and also seminary, really with the idea of becoming a campus minister, you know, because of Carl Caskey and Vance Engelman. And I was going to go to the Peace Corps, got accepted, had my assignment, you know, was scheduled to go for training, and then my draft board said, no, you're going to be 1A and you are going to get drafted. And I said, well, I'm not going to get drafted. So I went to my second choice, which was seminary. I'd already had an application started. It was underway at Chicago Theological Seminary, and so I finished it and got a full scholarship there and moved to Chicago and battled my draft board for 9 months because they seemed to think that they could keep me from going to seminary, which the law didn't allow them to do, but it was a big battle that went on and on for a long time. So I was in seminary and then left seminary after a while and did an internship that was connected with the seminary and got involved in local Chicago reform politics, which may sound weird, but that was my internship. CTS was a very unusual seminary. And stayed involved in local politics for the entire time I was in Chicago. Ended up in that stream. I ended up running Harold Washington when he ran for mayor. I ran the Lakefront campaign, which was a sort of white liberal area for him, and a lot of campaigns before that. But then went to law school in '73. First I worked at a folk music club, which was quite an experience, where we had all sorts of people. It wasn't really just folk music. I mean, it had people that no one's ever heard of, but it also had Miles Davis. It had
folk.
Yeah, I know. It had jazz too sometimes.
Okay.
It was mainly folky type stuff. I don't know if you know anything about folk music, but if you do, Doc Watson played there a lot. Arlo Guthrie played there. Linda Ronstadt played there. All sorts of people. I mean, it was a very popular place, and it was fascinating. You know, it was just as a life experience, it was a really cool thing. Not exactly a career path.
Yeah. Sounds like an eclectic group of musicians.
Oh, very, and it was really fun and weird working there. But anyway, I went to law school in '73, became a lawyer. I loved law school. It was the first time that I ever really took being a student seriously. I mean, really seriously. And I was really good. Like number 3, 4 student in my class. And I really enjoyed law school, but I didn't like being a lawyer, and ended up going into nonprofit work, advocacy, a lot of it around housing issues, some environmental stuff, and then ultimately ended up and worked for a foundation, and then ultimately ended up in Santa Fe as head of the local United Way, and I was there for 14 years, and then went to work for United Way of America, helping on a project to help other United Ways do what Santa Fe had done, which was to really dramatically change the nature of what they were doing. The United Way system has undergone and is undergoing really radical changes, from essentially just raising all this money from corporations and then beating it out to the same organizations every year, and saying, and then going back and doing this every year. And very risk averse, not wanting to offend anybody. To an organization which is about trying to actually solve problems in the community, and that's what it's about. It's not about distributing money, and to do that, working in a collaborative way with other organizations and leaders in the community to identify priorities, and then working together to actually try to figure out strategies that will work, measuring results, and huge change. And we were doing that in Santa Fe, and some others were, and then United Way of America changed, and wanted to spread that. And so I went to work there for a while, and then I did consulting work after that, pretty much doing the same work, but on my own with local United Ways, and then retired.
Our United Way campaign is going on right now. It should be finishing up this week.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah.
But there's much more involvement at the local level by the board, involvement with the organizations that are both benefiting from the United Way and the reviews that go through, making sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. And so it's been...
Yeah, I used to know the head of United Way here. I don't imagine she is anymore. I don't know, it was a long time ago. Can't remember her name. But
So how did your experience at OSU change your life?
well, there were a series of experiences. Now, as I told you earlier, the Wesley Foundation stuff, when I came to OSU, without going into any details, I was kind of a mess. I mean, I had a father who was, my parents were divorced when I don't remember them being together. So I was raised by a single mom working for Ford Motor Company, very little in the way of results, and my dad was a complete ass. He remarried several times, and he had a daughter from his last wife who was an alcoholic, and I used to go out and spend summers in Santa Fe at a motel out there, and I found myself becoming sort of the protector of my half-sister from their wars, her parents, and basically became a spy for the social service people. I started telling them what was going on. I mean, and that last summer I spent out there was just, I was kind of an emotional wreck after all that. I really was. And I came to OSU, and I was just I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know. I was just really, and I found my way into the Wesley Foundation, and Carl and Vance had all these different programs going on. Vance had this thing called the Skeptics Corner, which he had me go to, even though I wasn't a skeptic, and where I started getting exposed to ideas, that I had never been exposed to, and it just kind of went from there. And I don't think there's anything in my life that ever happened that was more important than that experience. And that's what got me involved in campus stuff, and that led me to meet all sorts of other interesting people, and be confronted with interesting ideas. There was a guy who lived in the basement of the Wesley Foundation, and he was the janitor. His name was John Rapp, and John had gone. He went to my high school. He was a year older than me, at least. I knew his brother, but I didn't know him. And he went to Yale. One of the few people from my high school, and went out of state. He went to Yale, dropped out of Yale to go join the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party as an organizer. People got killed doing that, and John did that for a while, and then he came back to Oklahoma and found his way somehow to OSU, and he was the janitor down there, and I got to know John, and John would get in these discussions. He was the first person to get me thinking differently about the Vietnam War. And because he read a lot, and he starts going, well, now actually, and very calm, and just a lot of experiences like that. I think I had a great college experience. Most of it, though, was not in classrooms. I don't think that's real unusual, but it was serious. It wasn't, partying. It was serious learning that took place. I also got some in classrooms too, obviously, but it was I wish my kids had had that experience. They didn't, and I wish they had. They don't have the same feeling towards college that I do. Other than all the pain and stuff that went through, it was college years were really good.
You said there are groups that get together periodically. since then?
The Kindred Spirit.
Kindred
reunions.
Spirit, uh-huh.
Yeah, we had, the first one was, as I recall, like 13, it wasn't any particular time, and just got this idea, you know, let's get the old group back together. And so I think the first one was 13 years after I left, which would have been, 81 or something. And then I located people, said, are you interested? Let's do a reunion back in Stillwater. And then they added names, and we got together, and it was so gratifying because everybody was doing good stuff. You know, they were all in some way. It may have been medicine, but and most of the others they were just doing public service, public spirited, you know, improve the world, improve lives kind of work. Everybody was, you know, it was very clear to me that what had happened in their lives at OSU during that period had an awful lot to do with who they became. It was certainly true of me, I knew, but it was also true of them. And it was really gratifying. Bob Swaffer, incidentally, you know, who was the, I don't know how much you know about Swaffer, he was a basketball player, he's 7 feet tall. And he's sort of famous because he was doing his laundry and his arm got caught in the washing machine or the dryer or something, and it literally twisted off his arm. And it was his roommate or some other jock who was a pre-med major who had happened to read an article of this groundbreaking idea when you have a severed limb sticking it in ice. And he did that, and I think, helicoptered Bob to OU or somewhere, you know, for surgery and everything. They reattached it. And he couldn't play basketball anymore. He can't use the arm very well, but you know, it's...
So this happened while he was here?
Oh, yeah. And so his basketball career was ended by that. Anyway, so he was the vice president of the student body on a non-reform slate. You know, it was the establishment slate. But Bob, really interesting guy, and he moved to Austin, Texas, and he got involved with computer stuff, and he's a potter, and he's kind of like an Austin hippie. I mean, if you look at him, you would conclude he is. Except, I mean, and we're friends on Facebook, and he's been in local films because, you know, he's 7 feet tall. He's got a beard down to here, and he looks like you know, he looks like, I don't know, you know, this. He is. I think probably, you know, half the town, or at least around UT, you know Bob, or know who he is.
Recognize
he's just a character, you know. Really smart guy, and just a really good guy. You know, it's neat to have, you know, have those kind of connections too.
What was that you mentioned early on? This is kind of backtracking. There was a group, Friday afternoon tea.
Yeah.
What was that?
So the reunions, when we did the reunions, we said, okay, well, what are we going to call it? You know, you call it a drummer, except not everybody was involved in the drummer. You know, not just them. And so there was this. Before I got here, some students had put together a student organization called the Friday Afternoon Tea and Glee Society, known as FATAGs. And the purpose of it was really to be an access point for student union rooms for meetings, and on, you know, kind of any subject, you know, that otherwise would not be able to get access. And so the name was kind of an ironic name, or sarcastic, whatever. And and it just persisted, you know. I don't know how long I mean, it was there before I got here, and it was here after I left, and different people, but they would just sort of keep it going. And so we decided to call the reunion the FATAG/drummer reunion. And the second one, but there were people who came to the second one who didn't come to the first one. The internet by then was really helpful in finding people. And we had a bigger turnout. And it was, again, the same thing. It was, you know, everybody was doing neat stuff. And that's when I got from Ken Doms, he brought with him these things that he had from his years at OSU, including the John Kenneth Galbraith letter and telegram and the letter they had sent to Galbraith with all of this documentation about what had been going on, and it represents, I think, the best history that there is of that period.
I don't have anything else, Ron. Do you have anything else you want to add? Will you be meeting again with this group?
Oh, good question. Actually, Chick Dambach told me that, the other thing that has happened since, Chick told me, and it really just made me so happy. There's something on campus called difficult discussions or something like that. And the Chick's been part of, he comes in and he told me that there's going to be a scholarship that they're going to put together. I think it's a scholarship that is going to be named after Dale Stockton and Margaret Brooks, and which is wonderful because both of those people, that's an appropriate vehicle, and he's planning on having another get together in 2017, which will be 50 years. Wow, 50 years after those events.
I hope you'll consider inviting some of us. Maybe talk with some folks if they want.
I haven't. I mean, I did 2 of them, and I wasn't going to do it again.
Oh, so you've done your time.
So I mean, I'll help Chick. I told him I'll help him locate people and stuff like that. But I was happy that he was going to do this one because I just didn't have it in me to do it again, another one.
Okay.
But I'm sure people will come. You know, if you create it, they will come.
You build it, they will come. Okay. Well, thank you, Ron. Appreciate the conversation today.